Everyone, remain calm.
That's how it always starts. But then later there's running and screaming.
Somebody talk to me! What is happening?
Welcome to Jurassic World.
You're listening to the Jurassic Park Podcast.
You want to consult here or in my bungalow? Hold on to your butts.
Well, we're back.
Hello and welcome to the 119th episode of the Jurassic Park Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Jost, and we're here to discuss all things Jurassic Park. In this episode, there is a birthday to celebrate and some news. Then we'll take a long-awaited trip back into the visitor center and speak with Stephen Ray Morris from the podcast See Jurassic Right. We discussed growing up Jurassic Park fans, podcasting, and I tested his worth in a new portion of the visitor center, so you won't want to miss that. Over the weekend, we had a ton of coverage from Frontier Expo. James Hawkins and Steve Hurl attended the expo for the podcast and uncovered the unveiling of the Jurassic World Evolution, gameplay footage, and more. They were able to interview a ton of people, developers, Jack Horner. Don't miss the first installment of their coverage that we uploaded to the podcast feed over the weekend. Go back, check the feed, make sure you downloaded it, and give it a listen. They tried to pry out some extra information, so you'll have to listen to find out. Lastly, here in the intro, I wanted to remind you that it is Jurassic Park Week over on Victoria Cantina's YouTube channel. Now, she is showcasing even more toys from the Jurassic series with JP Carnotaur, Ted Brothers, and the Jurassic Collection. But the kicker this time around is that all the proceeds from these videos this week will be donated to the Susan G. Komen Race for the Cure research initiative. So please go watch her videos, give them a like, share them around, tell your friends to watch. Also, we can help support Victoria in this generous endeavor. I'll be sure to post all the links in our show notes, and you'll see the videos on our website after they debut on her YouTube page. Alright, well that was an extended but surely well-deserved intro, so let's get this episode started off with a bit of Jurassic news from around the world.
18 minutes and your company catches up on 10 years of research.
Access made program. Access new security.
These pictures were taken in hospital in Costa Rica 48 hours ago.
I don't want to jump to any conclusions, but look.
Boy, we hate being right all the time.
But today, I guarantee it.
Chronicle Collectibles have another pre-order announcement ready on their Facebook page. It's for the Jurassic World Indominus Rex. Let me read a little bit from the press release on their page. Friday, October 13th at 12 p.m. CST, Chronicle Collectibles is proud to announce our Indominus Rex, sculpted by ILM and IREX creator Glenn McIntosh. The IREX is part of a two-piece set based on the final scene from Jurassic World, where the IREX and the T-Rex stand off in an epic battle. T-Rex in blue will be offered at a later date. The pre-order price is $750, regular retail after 30 days, $800. This is a massive dinosaur coming in at nearly 30 inches long and 12 inches tall, will be the centerpiece of your Jurassic Park collection. This piece will interlock with the T-Rex, creating a diorama that will be around 5 feet long. Even if you don't purchase both dinosaurs, the displays will work individually. This is the first high-end licensed dinosaur created for Jurassic World. ILM and Glenn McIntosh have created an Indominus Rex that is dynamic and very light on her feet. So there you have it. Of course, this promo image looks really good. If you want to check it out, we have the pictures in our show notes. And of course, the link to Chronicle Collectibles. Stay tuned because on October 13th, you will be able to pre-order this at 12 p.m. CST. This Tuesday, October 10th, is Michael Giacchino's birthday. He is the composer of the Jurassic World score and also the upcoming film Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. Happy birthday, Michael, and I can't wait to hear what you produce for the next film in the series.
Oh, there it is. There it is.
Let's open up the doors to the Visitor Center and welcome in Stephen Ray Morris, podcast producer and host of See Jurassic Right. It's been a quick second, but we're back in the visitor center, surrounded by these beautiful fossil beasts, and of course, that perpetual construction that's going on behind me for some reason. But today, I'm joined by a fellow podcaster who you've probably heard from the podcast See Jurassic Right. We've got Stephen Ray Morris here today. How are you, man?
I'm doing fabulous. Thank you for having me. The visitor center looks great. The mural up close is really beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah. I wish one day, that's the dream, right? Is to get one of those murals like just on a wall in your house or something.
I don't know if I've ever thought of it that way. I really need to do that. I got a basement. I think I'm gonna, commission somebody to paint that right now. Actually, I got to find an artist.
It could be like or like in Aliens where Ripley, it's like she's in you think she's in the forest and it like pulls back and it's like a screen. Like what if you did that?
Yeah.
Was it William Stout who did that mural? Like just all the way around, like a full 360 of like in dress. I mean, yeah, that would be the dream.
Dude, yeah, I'm gonna do that. Like actually The Lost World, Jeff Goldblum, he's yawning on the screen and pan out and you're like, oh, he's in the subway. All right, cool.
Yeah, you're right. That's actually a better reference, or a better reference to that kind of thing.
I'll have to get funny. Like a nice beachy scene painted behind me or something like that. But yeah, that'll be interesting. We'll see if I can do that. I got to find an artist. Usually I ask everybody a single question here. My wife introduced me to this concept, so I like doing it, and I've asked pretty much every guest that has been on the show. So here we go. If you were stuck in a kitchen with a Velociraptor, what would you do, and would you make it out alive?
Oh man, that's such a great question. I mean, oof. I guess the answer I should have is, pull a Lex and try and find something, with a mirror so I could trick the Velociraptor. But part of me would just welcome the sweet release of being eviscerated by a Velociraptor. Because then later, like after you're gone, everyone's like, dude, Steven got mauled to death by a Velociraptor. Like that's crazy, right? Yeah. And then it's like, that would be my claim to fame. Like,
and next thing you know, you're on a mural on somebody's basement wall.
Yeah. I'd be part of that mural of just me, like, just sort of like welcoming, like the rap, like giving it a hug, and then it just probably not knowing what to do. And then, but, especially if it's I'm imagining she's thinking like the kitchen from the movie.
Yeah.
I feel like as far as kids go, I feel like their strategy worked out really well, because I think if you're a full-grown adult, I don't think you could hide as well as they did. So I feel like I might just have to, embrace, the Velociraptors.
Yeah, I've gotten that answer quite a bit, and I one of these days I gotta edit them all together, all the responses I've gotten, just to see like what the technique is, which is the best one. And most of the time, people are just like, I don't think I would make it out alive. I don't think there's any scenario where I can get out of this situation. And yeah, you fulfilled that too pretty well.
Oh, so I'm glad I've joined the lineage of great guests that you've had so far. I think it's one of those things too where it's like, even in the world today, there are ways to meet big predators like tigers, especially. Excuse me. And I just think that I just don't think I give off the confident enough energy to survive a tiger. I think a tiger would look at me and be like, you're a snack. Like, you are bred. Mm-hmm. You're like a deer. You're meant to be eaten. And I just don't think I could. Definitely don't think I could fake it till I make it. I think in this kind of scenario, I would just have to be like, you know what? I'm part of. This is my. This is where I am at in the food chain.
Yeah, the closest I got to this scenario, I was in South Africa on a safari tour for my. What do you call it? Honeymoon. And we're on like the back of like a Jeep essentially, and just staring directly into the eyes of like lions and cheetahs and stuff. And you're like, please stay where you are. Don't come any closer. I mean, you're pretty close. This is very cool, but also don't eat me. Like, don't jump on this vehicle right now. You're not surrounded by a walled vehicle looking through a window. You're just in a wide open vehicle. Like, that thing could maul me at any point, and it's terrifying. So I can imagine being in front of a raptor and you just look at it, you're like, I don't think I couldn't punch the thing. Like, I don't think it would care. Like, that's some thick skin. So
You're
I don't know.
You're so right about that. It's funny. People punch sharks all the time, but nobody's talked about punching a tiger. And I definitely don't think you could punch a velociraptor. I think, I honestly think there's an element too of like predators. Like, I think if a velociraptor were staring at you and you looked right into its eyes, I think you'd be mesmerized. Like, I think that's kind of what happens to Muldoon. Like, in his last moment, he's sort of like absorbed in this moment, and then he's eaten.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that because you mentioned like just welcoming it, and I thought about Muldoon, and he's built up to be this amazing, dude like that can handle any kind of situation. He's been out in the wilderness and stuff before. He's been around predators all his life, but then he just lets it happen. He just like he'd rather go for the clever line than shoot the the raptor and stuff like that. So it's really interesting how that all worked out, and I always wonder what is his thought process in that moment.
Yeah, I think a great hunter knows when he's bested. I think it's kind of like Roland Tembo. Like, he's just kind of like, you know what? I've suffered enough losses. I know when to count myself out, like he does in the, near the end of The Lost World. He doesn't keep hunting,
Mm-hmm.
So I think Muldoon is probably a lineage in that same kind of lineage.
Yeah, he's essentially just bowing down. He's been defeated. There's no way out. And if that one didn't get him, there's probably another two somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I know you got a lot of stuff going on with the podcast and everything else you're currently doing, but I do want to travel back to the beginning. Ooh. Find out when this all started, your Jurassic obsession. When did this start for you?
It definitely started, I think, again, just like a lot of us growing up, we were obsessed with dinosaurs as a kid. And, I think they really go hand in hand, especially for people who are kind of in their late 20s, early 30s. Like, that's, I'm 30, and it was just, I was at the perfect age to like, Jurassic Park really came at the perfect time, I think, for somebody my age, because I think if I had been, I don't know. It's hard to tell sometimes because on my podcast, I've talked to a lot of people who were born after Jurassic Park came out, and it's no different. So what do I know? But I just think being 6 years old when Jurassic Park came out was like the perfect, I don't know, it felt to me like this like super spark of like I was starting to become aware of things, but then I also still had kind of some innocence, I guess. I don't know. But I liked dinosaurs, because I have all these, books and stuff and remember liking dinosaurs. So of course it was sort of only natural, I think, for parents to be like, well, there's this big dinosaur movie coming out, we should take our kids to it. So seeing Jurassic Park when I was in theaters, when my dad took me, and sort of really being mesmerized by it, and I sort of jokingly say that it's like, that's sort of, I feel like when, like, there's before Jurassic Park and after Jurassic Park. It almost feels like that's like a very key early new synapses being born and stuff in my brain, sort of thing. So that's when it really began. And pretty much my entire childhood up through, because Jurassic Park 3 came out the summer before my freshman year of high school. So it was like that, that period from 6 to 14 was like the Jurassic Park adolescence kind of thing.
Yeah, I think we had a pretty similar trajectory when it comes to this fandom. I was 7 going on 8 in October, perfect. But it's something about that time frame because you're super into dinosaurs and everything like that. Like, these mythical creatures essentially are new and magical and all that stuff. So, I had the same thing, all these books and everything, and then you come across this movie and you're like, it's the greatest thing I've ever seen. Like, there's nothing that can top this. And, all these characters and everything, and the toys. There was just so much to latch onto as like a 6 or 7 year old.
Yeah, it was the perfect. Just imagine. I wonder what it was like for, somebody who's maybe a bit older, and it's like your first, your first dinosaur movie was like the Ringo Starr film, like Caveman. Like, what if that was your first, you were a dinosaur nut as a kid, and then your first look at seeing dinosaurs. I actually really like Caveman, that Ringo Starr movie, but not necessarily for the dinosaurs, but like, it's a very underrated satire comedy thing. But, you know, I feel like we got the perfect dinosaur movie.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like it was just handed to us. I mean, it was almost like, I feel like it was just very natural in that way for us to fall in love. Like, it was just a perfect gift.
Yeah, you know, you do have a point, though, about the younger generations, I guess, because they are just as, you know, involved as we are and love this as much. And I guess for me, that would be like, you know, Star Wars or even, you know, some of Indiana Jones and stuff like that. Those came out before I was born, and I love them, you know, nearly just as much. And I go crazy for them, can't wait for the new movies and all that stuff. Like, you know, we're still waiting for, you know, more Star Wars and Indiana Jones, and, you know, they were before my time. So I'm still obsessed, just as I guess any younger person is now. And especially with the franchise continuing, it's just continually growing, I guess.
Yeah, and I can imagine it would be very exciting. I have a really good friend, my friend Holland, who I worked with for a bit, and she is a huge X-Files fan, but she grew up after the show was already... she was a fan after the show already went off the air. So for her, when it was coming back this, you know, last year or year and a half ago, it was just such a thrilling, for her, she was saying it was such a thrilling thing to see advertising it for it to be part of the conversation. And I can imagine for somebody who's born after the Jurassic Park franchise kind of went, you know, when it was dormant, I imagine that when Jurassic World was first coming out and now Fallen Kingdom coming out next year, how exciting it must be to like be around when advertising and it in commercials and just sort of being part of the general conversation again. I can imagine for people who had never experienced that the first time, that being super cool. Sorry, can I swear? I imagine it being super cool for people who had never experienced that marketing blitz. Like, I think for both of us, Lost World was probably our really big movie, because that was like toys, commercials, Burger King, talk shows, you know, just like that. Lost World was the big, you know, being a bit older, sort of experiencing, you know, where the mainstream was obsessed with one of the Jurassic Park films. Those are my clearest memories, if anything, is of when the preamble to the Lost World coming out.
Yeah, same here. You know, I look back. Actually, I was doing like videos from Christmas of '93, and I'm watching myself opening these dinosaur toys and figures and stuff, and I'm going nuts over it. So at that point, I had certainly seen the movie, and I just don't know what my perspective was on the franchise as a whole. You know, I don't really remember much during that time frame. But you're right. When the Lost World comes around, you all of a sudden know, you know, you can sense a lot more, and you know what's going on. You're older, and you have this want to collect all these toys and to play with them and just create these scenarios in your head. There's a lot more going on around that time.
Yeah, no, I imagine for somebody, you know, again, I mean, that's awesome that you actually have footage of you opening your Jurassic, because I got the Visitor Center for Christmas of '93, nice. And there's a great photo of me on the Instagram, or will be eventually at some, or it's somewhere, but of me like playing with the Visitor Center when I'm like 6 years old. But that's awesome that you have actual video footage of it. That's really cool. You should put that up somewhere if you haven't already. I don't know if I thought I went to do it one episode. I'm not sure if I did or not. I think I did. It's like ran out of time and didn't do it. But I know I covered, I think last Christmas with Jay Jurassic, we covered like our experiences from that time. And I had no idea. Like I said, I don't remember anything from that time frame essentially, but I just watched the footage and I kind of described what I went through, and it was awesome to watch, because you can tell I am so excited, and I know the characters, I know the dinosaurs and all that, so I'm sitting there watching it like, how do I know all this stuff? How am I that versed in all of this at 7 years old? Like, that just, or I guess by Christmas I was 8, but like, it just shows how deep this obsession runs through people in our generation. I guess not just our generation, but, you know, in our generation specifically, because that was, I feel like, the perfect time. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like, I've been doing a segment on my pod where I'm having like, I mean, again, these people are so gracious, but I'm lucky to be surrounded by a lot of really talented performers, and so they've been basically acting out my childhood fan fiction that I wrote right after The Lost World came out. So it's, I was 10 years old. This was 20 years ago. And the funny thing that they've all kind of been observing when they're reading this stuff, it's like, oh, you spelled the dinosaurs' names correctly, but you can't even spell the word boat or vehicles or, there, and there. And, grammar and all that stuff is terrible. But for some reason you can spell Parasaurolophus and Diplodocus and Deinonychus. It's like, what is it about dinosaurs and Jurassic Park specifically that sort of allows that sort of childhood neuroses to like flourish in a weird, it's weird that it does that, but it's something I've noticed with so many people that, Jurassic Park fans that we know and also listeners that we've come into contact with. That seems to be like a running theme.
Yeah, and I think Jurassic Park captured that perfectly because, Tim Murphy, for a lot of us, he was us, He was that child that knew all the dinosaurs. He was, crazy about them, and he essentially was just reflecting all of us as kids at that point in time. Lex was a little bit different unless you were, maybe a little bit older and into computers and all that, but as for dinosaurs and all that, he was essentially mirroring all of us, which was just killer as a kid because I wanted to be him so bad. And you watch this movie and you're like, I wish I had had the chance to been Tim or whatever. It's just so awesome that they captured that perfectly for all of us.
Yeah, I mean, he was like the, he's number one. He was the OG Jurassic Park fanboy. And he gets invited on tour, gets to meet the rock stars, gets to meet Alan Grant and Dr. Ellie Sattler. Like, speaking of which, we're recording on Joseph Mazzello's birthday. So,
yes, we are.
Happy birthday to Joseph Mazzello.
Yeah, and the fact that even in the movie, Joe has to like respond for Grant at time. Grant's like, Tim, what's the name of this one? And he's like, the Gallimimus part. But it's just so funny how that works, and that's something that people still say today is that kids know these things better than any adult. Even paleontologists. I don't know.
Yeah, no, we're obsessed, and nobody's paying, as a child, nobody's paying you to be obsessed with these things. No. But it's like you do it because again, it's that thing of, it just dinosaurs sort of spark your imagination better than almost anything.
Yeah. And I do find interesting though, the people maybe in the generations before us even that got into this through the book and the novel and all that, how they view it, because maybe they weren't into collecting the toys, and maybe when they saw the film, they didn't necessarily love it because, how vast the book is. It's so different in many aspects. But the movie captures it in a way that I guess kids and younger generations could enjoy it. But obviously they enjoy it too. But I just wonder what that experience was like, knowing it was so different than the book.
Yeah. No, that was something very interesting, I think, because I did an episode where we just sort of focused on the See Jurassic Right podcast. We just focused on the book, and I talked to two individuals, comedian Jared Logan, who writes on the James Corden Show, and my friend Se Young, and both of them actually had read the book before the movie. But Se Young's like our age, but Jared was a little bit older, and I think just coming at a perspective of this. I mean, really, I think what it came down to is like the movie sort of kind of creates a more palpable version of the book, where it's like it's just the part that sparks the imagination and not necessarily the political and businessy intrigue that might not necessarily get us excited, as kids. The sort of corporate espionage plots and stuff are kind of left on the cutting room floor, in a way. And so Spielberg sort of just got the essence of what we love about what, at least what he loved about the original book, and I think what he thought would appeal most to audiences of all ages.
Yeah, and the good thing about that is by leaving a lot of it on the cutting room floor is that they're able to spread it out throughout 4 movies now, hopefully 5. And, one of those scenes that stood out to me because my mom was reading it. That was my introduction to this all, actually, now that I, think about it a little bit. But she was reading the book before, I guess, the movie came out. And, I just remember, like, her being freaked out and had to stop reading because there was, like, a raptor den scene. I forget specifically the details of that scene, but I think there's a raptor den scene. It's very dark and creepy. And that's something that hasn't really come to light in any of the movies. So that's like one of those scenes that I'm like, please do that. Do something like that. They talk about it. I think even maybe some concept art or something like that for Jurassic World showcase like a raptor den of sorts. So I would love to see something like that in the next movie.
Yeah, it's kind of insane how like even after all these years. Jurassic World, so much of Henry Wu's stuff was taken from the original book. I almost feel, to me, the feeling of the overall structure of Jurassic World feels more like the original book because it's like, the park wasn't open in the book, but the idea of like going down and then kind of returning to a home base and then going back out again into the wild. And then that, that sort of back and forth structure was, to me, very similar to the original book where it's like, the power goes out, but then they get it back up and then it goes down again. And it's like that instead of, in the movie where once it hits the fan, it, that it just goes from there. But, it's kind of, I wonder if there's any other, I guess you could almost look to TV shows in that example of like, what's an original story, an original book that has, it's the gift that keeps on giving, and the fact is like, I just recently reread the Lost World book and I was almost shocked at how much from memory growing up, and I haven't read, I think this is my first time rereading the Lost World in maybe like 5 years or something like that, and maybe longer than that. And I'm almost shocked at how much there is in that book that like is so untapped to still be brought to life cinematically. So J.A. Bayona, if you're out there, the movie's already done. So maybe
it's too late now.
We'll have to Jurassic World 3.
Yeah.
Get those Carnotauruses. I guess they got the camouflage part of the Carnotauruses in there, but know, or the motorcycle chase with the Velociraptor with the hoop around its mouth. Somebody trapped in a cage as it's being kicked around, and Arby's being kicked around in the cage. It's like that stuff is that whole chase, raptor chase, like the dual raptor chase in the Lost World book is so cool. And it's like, I would love to see that realized on screen in some form.
Yeah. It's funny how much Jurassic World gets criticized at this point for a lot of these aspects that actually were part of the books. And all you can do is just sit there and be like, well, yeah, if you didn't like it, that's fine, but it was part of this, it did come from somewhere. It's not just like, pulled out of thin air.
Yeah, I have a feeling I'm excited about Fallen Kingdom because I think in some ways this, these new Jurassic Park movies are kind of in a way like, like Marvel or Star Wars. They have a little bit of a bigger picture in mind. And just from what I've heard, I feel like I'm in kind of a weird way. When I was on a flight recently and I watched Alien Covenant, and I have very mixed feelings about Prometheus, but Alien Covenant weirdly, the sequel to Prometheus, weirdly made me appreciate Prometheus a little bit more. It sort of retroactively made me enjoy Prometheus more, and I wonder maybe if just what the rumors are out there about Fallen Kingdom, I wonder if it's going to do the same thing for Jurassic World in that way, for people who didn't like Jurassic World or were kind of lukewarm about it. But
yeah,
I enjoyed it a lot, and I enjoy going back to it. It's my I go on record, it's my second favorite Jurassic Park movie. So
that's not a bad spot. That's a good one. I think that's fair.
So, but yeah, we'll see. Again, it's still a little less than a year away. No trailer yet. We're just going on, fumes at this point about what to expect.
Yeah, trying to podcast about it every week. You come up with theories and and stuff, and try to branch out into other areas, but trying to think about what's going to happen, it just kills you. Every week you're like, wow, like we have no details. So it's kind of a interesting time.
I mean, that's why I admire you and the In General podcast gang, because, you've all tasked yourselves with, and that's what I love listening to both your shows, is because you guys like keep the conversation alive. Like my podcast is more about, memory and nostalgia and emotion, and, more about people's personal experiences and surrounding these movies. You guys are always tasked with keeping the conversation alive, and I appreciate, and as a fan, I love listening, because it's like there's always got to be that space in the community where you can just be like, oh my God, there's a volcano, on a candy box art. Like, what does it mean? Like, oh, there's a baby Triceratops in the key art for the early, promotional materials. Does that mean there's going to be a baby Triceratops in the new movies? And is it going to feature? And are they going to ride it? And are they going to like redo the scene where Lex rode the or was going to ride the baby Triceratops in the original? It's like, just I love that space, and so it's. But yeah, I can totally imagine it being hard, especially for Fallen Kingdom, where it's like, and I think everyone's very aware of just how little morsels we get as Jurassic Park fans versus, Star Wars fans and some of the Marvel people who are always getting peeks and behind the scenes, and everyone's really active on social. Our fandom is very quiet, relatively.
Yeah, you're right. It really is, especially nowadays when, Ron Howard takes over Han Solo and posts what seems like a new picture every day. And, recently we've been getting tons of pictures from The Last Jedi and stuff like that. So, yeah, we don't have trailers for either of those, but it seems like the fandom, or the creators, are just allowing stuff to freely come out in a way that this, Universal and the creators over here aren't. So I think maybe it's a good thing, but, you don't want that overload. But at the same time, I'm like, just give us a little something to gnaw on for a little bit,
I remember some interview, Guillermo del Toro was like, I think it was in this range of this kind of conversation where he was like, if you give somebody 10% of something, quote unquote spoilers or whatever, or just some sort of tease, then you can keep the rest of it a secret, because you will satiate fans enough that they won't go looking for stuff. Whereas Jurassic with Fallen Kingdom, like, so many people were like, it's just like, we're like, there's just some people who are like detectives, like looking up serial numbers and weird website domains to just, looking at the first AD's cousin's sister's roommate to try and be like, oh, they were, on set for the day. It's just like, people, sometimes like you're saying, it's like, if they just give us a little tease, maybe we won't be scraping around for other stuff that maybe we could that reveal should be saved for when we watch the movie. Whereas maybe showing us a cool promo image of Jeff Goldblum back in character, it's like seeing him again back in the role of Ian Malcolm. That's not a spoiler of what he's going to look like, unless he's a head in a jar or something. But like that's not seeing what he looks like back in the movie isn't going to be a spoiler for us. That's just going to get us excited. Exactly. It's not going to ruin. What he's dressed like. I mean, again, unless what he is dressed like, it has something to do with the themes of the story. If he's been on, if he's gone to live on the island and gone crazy, or if he's joined up with the government suits to put a stop to Chris Pratt's character and Bryce Dallas Howard, Owen and oh my God, why can't I? Claire? If he's gonna try and stop Claire, and it's like, maybe if what he's dressed up like affects the themes and plot of the story, but he's probably just going to be wearing some sort of thing that looks like his outfits from the previous, from Jurassic Park and Lost World. So satiate us in that way, and then we won't try and sneak a peek where we where we probably shouldn't.
I imagine they release a picture and he's just dressed in like all white, and I'm like, whoa, like that's gonna give us something to talk about, because the complete opposite of who he is, like that would be insane. But not that I expect that to happen, but that would be one of those things where you're like, oh, this is a simple, character reveal, but he's wearing something completely different than him to wear, because the colors and everything makes such a big difference in the original movie. He's wearing black, Hammond's wearing white, so it'd be an interesting turn of perspective there.
Yes, and so that's a case where I feel like that maybe would be
maybe a little too much.
Maybe a little too much, but I think in general stuff like that isn't necessarily spoiling the story. I mean, that example would be obviously, but in a lot of cases, sometimes just letting us know what the characters look like, or even just a great shot of Claire and Owen, back at it again, or or maybe a new dinosaur, or something like that. I'm
surprised because there has been so many leaks and such throughout this whole production, that usually when something like that happens, they kind of try to cover it up in a way by releasing a promo image of some sort or something, and they haven't done that. Even though there has been a lot of leaked stuff, and we essentially know a lot of what's going on and where things are taking place, and even what some people are wearing. So it's interesting that they haven't tried to cover their tracks like that.
I mean, I think there hasn't been anything as big as the no feathers kind of thing. The Colin Trevorrow, saying no, there hasn't been anything like that where, or the sort of early leaks of where people were saying the trained raptors and stuff, that kind of stuff blowing out of proportion, so that Colin Trevorrow and Frank Marshall and having to go publicly and be like, no, it's going to be this way. I feel like as far as leaks go, there hasn't been any. I mean, if anything, again, the leaks that I've seen are getting me excited, so it's why not tease one or two of them, and then we'll shut up until Thanksgiving when supposedly when the new trailer comes out. But I don't think there's anything quite as personally, I don't think there's any leaks that have quite sort of necessitated any kind of damage control, but who knows?
Yeah, and it's funny because when Jurassic World came out, we got some stuff here and there, like the Mark Engler poster that was, the raptor on the vehicle in the jungle. And nothing happened from that. I mean, that never came true. And then the East Dock sign, that wasn't even in the movie. So all these things that got us hyped and pumped to talk about stuff never even came to fruition. So I'm even surprised nothing that has happened.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just surprised nothing like that has even happened. Almost fake outs in a way. But it does sort of upset you as a fan, sort of like how people were ranting about how, Rogue One trailer was completely different from the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, who knows? I mean, it's a curious approach from Universal to sort of take a step back from the marketing. I wonder, maybe they're almost being like, you know what? We didn't know that Jurassic World was going to be a big hit. So we're gonna sort of kind of continue to try to be the underdog, so that we're underselling expectations in case things don't. I mean, I've heard the budget is better for Fallen Kingdom than for Jurassic World. So who knows? Maybe they're just sort of trying to take a backseat approach and see how that works, instead of, where you have a movie like, I feel like all the DC movies, it was crazy to me almost that I feel like when Batman v Superman finally came out, it's I feel like I've seen trailers for this for 3 years. It's I wonder if they're maybe just you know what, maybe we're going to be the movie studio that doesn't say anything, so that when your movie finally does come out, it's, or even how I felt with some of the Marvel movies, some of the bigger Marvel movies, where it's we're talking about it so much before the movie comes out that finally when the movie does come out, we're like, oh, okay, that was cool. And then there's no more conversation. So I think with, and at least with Marvel and Star Wars, it's well, they have movies coming out every year, so they can afford to have the conversation end pretty quickly because you're just rolling on right to the next one. Whereas with Jurassic World, it's that's the only, I mean, there's probably a lot of crossover with Fast and the Furious, I guess, but and maybe Minions, but in the grand scheme of things, it's we've got 2 to 3 years, in between each movie. And so maybe they're just trying to control the conversation. But obviously us as fans, we're just going to talk about it all the time, no matter what. So
yeah, it's a really tough call because I wonder how it'll be received, because Jurassic World obviously made so much money and people were very excited about it. Obviously us fans, but even random, theater goers were very excited about it. But there has been a lot of fallout, I feel like, and even recently more so with Colin Trevorrow and stuff like that. There's been a lot of fallout. So I just hope they planned all that into their equation, whatever they're doing. But I'm sure it'll be fine. It is going up against a lot of big things that summer. So it will be interesting to see how it fares against, like, I think, Avengers, I think, is coming out that a month earlier, I believe.
I think so, in May.
That's a movie with some legs, but who knows? I mean, it might just blow everything out of the water again. So I don't know. I hope so. I mean, I hope it does well.
I feel like the general audiences liked it overall. They had a good time. I think, us as, again, more hardcore fans, I think we're invested in having an opinion either way. And so there, it's funny too, because it's like there'll be days where people will ask me how I feel about it, and I'll feel completely one way, and then on other days I'll feel completely another way, and then other days I'm like, well, let's focus on this aspect. So it's like, okay, here's my opinion of the movie, but only in relation to Claire's character journey. Okay, here's what I think about the movie, but only in relation to the Indominus Rex as a dog versus a Jaws-like creature, as a puppy versus, that's finding its feet, versus thinking about it as sort of the faceless monster that is always just pursuing. It's like, okay, here's what I think of the movie in relation to the other Jurassic Park movies. Okay, here's what I think of the real, it's we could talk about this forever. So it's like, I almost have to like, what's it called? Like, just segment your brain, sort of divide and conquer in a way,
Yeah, and it's tough nowadays. Like you try to tell people like, hey, maybe you should view it a different way, a different angle, and maybe you'll find a little bit something different in the movie there. But these days with social media, nobody cares. Their opinions have already been set, so there's almost no use in like trying to dissuade somebody or trying to make them, have your opinion in a way. But all you can do is try to, I guess, persuade people to view things a little bit differently. And you might have to do it one issue at a time, like you said.
Yeah. No, you're right. It's one opinion, the one opinion to unite us, Lord of the Rings style, the one ring, the one opinion. Whereas, to go back to X-Files, that new revival season was pretty much trash. And I think a lot of people feel that way, and a lot of hardcore fans feel that way. And I think general audiences feel that way. But at the same time, there was something so exciting about seeing these two characters that we love back on screen. And the one Darren Morgan episode was incredible, with comedian Kumail Nanjiani as the guest, as one of the guest stars, and Rhys Darby. And like, as fans, it's nice that at least we can be in a community sometimes that is, for the most part, very open to having multiple opinions and sort of contradicting opinions at the same time. But yeah, sometimes when you only have 140 characters, you have to be like, I liked it, it was fine, and you're like, well, that doesn't really sum up my it's anytime you give something a score or a rating, you feel like you have to stick with it. But it could change per day. It's fluid. It's
of course,
quantum criticism. When you try and measure it, it changes.
Yeah, opinions change. When I first saw Jurassic Park 3, I was severely disappointed. I remember that situation, being in that theater, and when the movie ended, just being like, wow, like, what did I just watch? Like, what happened? And over time, you change. You just change, and especially, you kind of brought it up before about Prometheus and the Resurrection, right? There's so many movies I keep forgetting.
Alien Covenant.
Oh, that's right. Your opinion changes when you view something new. So I feel like Jurassic World, in a sense, did that for me for Jurassic Park 3. I feel like there's aspects of Jurassic World that carried through and could have been viewed a certain way in Jurassic Park 3 that you almost change your opinion. And you're like, well, maybe this movie was almost a setup. Obviously, it wasn't meant to be that way, but you can almost tie two and two together and connect some dots that maybe aren't there, but sort of work.
Yeah, I think that's my big Jurassic... if we're talking about Jurassic Park 3, that's my big Jurassic Park 3 spiel that I always love to talk about, is that one of the credited screenwriters is Alexander Payne, who did Sideways and About Schmidt and The Descendants, and somebody known for their sort of black comedy and satire. And so in a way, I mean, again, it's that, you know, having multiple ways of enjoying something or multiple thoughts on something. But my favorite lens to view Jurassic Park 3 is through kind of this absurdist black comedy angle where Alan Grant is sick of everyone, but he just can't get a break, you know? And I feel like, to me, again, you know, like you're saying, it's maybe not necessarily the intent of the filmmakers, or, you know, it doesn't reflect the overall finished product, but it's sort of, okay, here's that roadmap that I can use to sort of enjoy a movie in this kind of way. And so for me, Jurassic Park 3, I enjoy it the most as a black comedy in that form. And so I'm not saying that's correct or the only way to view that movie, but for me, when I look at it through that lens, it takes on a whole new life for me, and I just appreciate it more than I probably would if I watched it another way. But
yeah, I could say the same thing about The Happening, you know? Back when the hype for that movie came out, and, you know, I mean, at that point, M. Night was a little on his downward spiral, I guess you could say. But, you know, you expect the big things from him, and it didn't work. It didn't work at all. But if you view it as a comedy, it's like the funniest movie you could ever see.
Sorry, that was great. Oh my God, yeah, you're right.
I love it. I love it.
Look, I mean, you got to do what you got to do to enjoy a movie sometimes, you know.
Yeah. So, you know, you mentioned, you know, opinions changing, and right now, what's your opinion on Fallen Kingdom? What do you expect? What do you think's going to happen? Do you have any hopes or expectations?
My expectation, and this is a very specific fan thing, but we're here talking, so I feel like I can give a very specific answer that maybe doesn't make as much sense if you know, some person who's only seen Jurassic Park a few times or you know, or is one of those people who doesn't even know that other Jurassic Park movies exist and only Jurassic Park and Jurassic World exist. But I was talking to Chris from Jurassic Outpost about this a little bit, and just my excitement level for Fallen Kingdom. And I went to Universal Studios about a month or so ago, and seeing the Fallen Kingdom poster in the wild was so cool. And so my very specific answer is, I feel like Fallen Kingdom, from kind of what I can tell, I feel like this is going to be the movie that really ties all the Jurassic Park movies into a solid. It's going to be it's going to make this a universe. I feel like that's what we've been waiting for, because, you know, Jurassic Park and Lost World are a lot more connected because they were made by the same filmmaker. But, you know, there's a looseness to the sequels that feel like, okay, here's the next adventure. But I have a very strong feeling, and I could be wrong, that Fallen Kingdom is going to be like, no, here's how Jurassic Park 3 plays into this movie. Here's how Lost World plays into this movie. Here's how Jurassic World and Jurassic Park, you know, before and after these movies. I feel like there's going to be a sense of history and continuity established in Fallen Kingdom that I think will be very different than any of the movies we've seen before. And again, as somebody who loves Jurassic Park, but also just wants it to be the biggest thing, like the Marvel movies or Star Wars, like, I'm excited for that possibility.
Yeah, you're right. The through line that goes through all these movies is very thin. You know, there's little dots that connect everything, but it's mostly just separate stories with some of the same characters and some new ones. But this, I feel, yeah, you're right. Fallen Kingdom is probably going to be the first movie to actually be like a direct sequel. You know, maybe it does have a 3-year gap or however many years or whatever, but it will be like a direct sequel, essentially. And that'll be interesting to see how it encapsulates that movie, Jurassic World, and all the others, because I think you're right. I think it'll tie some threads here and there and connect some dots, and, you know, maybe it will travel the same kind of path as the Lost World did, or maybe it will be as dark as that movie, but I don't know. I mean, it's all up in the air right now, but that's an interesting, you know, way to look at it, at least.
Yeah. I just think in terms of what excites me as a Jurassic Park fan, I think that's just the number one thing. Like, in Jurassic Park, recently rewatching Jurassic Park 3, it's like, oh, it's kind of cool, obviously, having, Dr. Sattler, having Ellie, having Laura Dern come back, and, having a reference to the, like, oh, I wasn't in San Diego, or, like, having Ian Malcolm talked about a little bit. Mm-hmm. Like, that stuff was, like, really cool. And I think Jurassic World has that same level. I mean, it's a little bit deeper because it takes place on Isla Nublar, and we have Dr. Henry Wu coming back, but there's still that same... The references are very kind of cheeky and fun and Easter eggy, but they're not fundamentally affecting the overall nature of the universe. And I think... I don't know, I just have a good feeling that... and it might be dashed again, but I have a good feeling that we're going to, it's almost like Rogue One in a way, or even Force Awakens. Like, both those movies kind of had fundamental things that affected the overall mythology of the universe. And in a way, I'm hoping that Fallen Kingdom will do something like that for me. So do you, in terms of what I know about the Jurassic Park universe, like, I hope it creates a shift.
Yeah. Are you into the idea of, like, this expanded universe with, like, other stories and maybe comics and TV shows and, all this canon material?
I am. Again, I'm not the first one to point this out, but it is very interesting. And I just got to think that maybe monetarily it's just, I can't pretend to be Mr. Executive, Mrs. Executive, and kind of know financially how all this stuff works, or if it really even affects sales, or, but, I mean, again, I feel like a lot of that supplemental material is really cool and really gets people excited in between the movies. But I mean, it just seems interesting that if they're choosing not to do any of that stuff for these movies, I mean, there's got to be some sort of financial reason why it's not worth it or something. Because, like, I would definitely be they did do a Jurassic World Junior novelization, which I feel like I don't feel like that many people know about or own. But and then there was some trading cards that were released in Europe. But I mean, no comic books. We're just now getting a Jurassic World video game based on the new movies, I mean, other than the Jurassic Park Builder, the mobile game. But I mean, it's one of those things where, like, because again, the Star Wars and Marvel fans were, and I'm a fan of them too, like, you're so spoiled by all of this stuff. But it's like, again, I can't pretend to know the business side of things, and so as I'm wondering why there isn't tie-in novels and video games and short films, and I just don't know. But I would obviously love all that stuff. I mean, I'm Fry from Futurama, take my money, at this point.
Yeah, speaking of, I guess, the Jurassic Universe, I know you wrote a book, Molding a Jurassic Universe, and that's one of these things that I love about this community is people like you and others in the community, whether it is podcasting, art, or writing, or, anything, literally anything. We all do some really awesome stuff, and it's great to see community members strengthening, the fandom with stuff like this. I really liked your book there. It was awesome.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, the book was, in a weird way, I guess the book was almost like a preamble to doing this podcast, because I think for a while people were even asking me, like, why don't you do a Jurassic Park podcast? And it's that thing where it's like, I think as a fan of something, you want to do it right. And so I think for me, I didn't want to do a Jurassic Park podcast until I could think of a way that only sort of adds to the community. And, that's why, like, I have friends who have, I know like 4 people who do Buffy podcasts, and I love every single one of them, because each one is a different, it's all a symphony, it's all adding to the conversation. And so, that's the same thing with the See Jurassic Right, is I feel like it's occupying a different niche, but of all the cool Jurassic Park podcasts out there. And the book was my first foray back into the fandom, because, again, for us, like, Jurassic Park 3 comes out, we're checking Dan's JP3 page every day, hoping for something to come back. And, eventually you go off to college, and, and again, it's like I feel like the Jurassic Park fandom for me, is kind of, didn't go extinct. It became a little dormant. And I think it was really the Jurassic Park 20th anniversary that sort of got me started to be amped again, but also discovering all these wonderful Jurassic Park Tumblrs, and then starting to check out podcasts like Velociraptor's Tumblr, really great Jurassic Park Tumblr, and I Heart Jurassic Park. And yeah, so the book Molding a Jurassic Universe was sort of my way of like, because at the time I also wanted to be I wanted to sort of do this sort of geeky journalism type stuff, Geek and Sundry, those kind of places. And so that was my sort of, in a way, for me, writing those essays and creating that book was sort of my way of committing and being back into the fandom, like how, you're doing this podcast. Like that was sort of my project to get back into the world.
Yeah, exactly. The way I viewed it was essentially you were just writing your way through a podcast. Essentially, you've got it all there. If you had just put that to word in your own words, that would have been essentially a podcast. And I love that about it because, especially it's a thing of its time too. Because you talked about pre-Jurassic World and what things are like, what's going to happen, and that was really interesting to kind of go back and wonder, or see where your headspace was at that time.
Yeah, it would be. I think it works well in that way that it's sort of. I mean, because we're never going to go back to that period again. We're never going to, unless Jurassic Fallen Kingdom comes out, and then Jurassic World 3 comes out, and then it's another 20 years, another 14 years before we get another, a third Jurassic World trilogy or Jurassic Park trilogy. But it kind of felt like we were existing in a time where it was like, we're never going to be in this space again. I imagine it's how Star Wars fans felt in the early 90s, where, there was no new Star Wars on the horizon. And, I can imagine when George Lucas is like special editions and then prequels, it's like, and then after that, it's like, well, we're going to get, now there's never going to be a time without Star Wars, in our lifetimes. I can't imagine.
No, I know. I keep thinking like, I'm going to miss Star Wars. Like I'm going to die and Star Wars is going to keep going. And I'm not going to know what happens. Star Wars will outlive us all. Yeah, I'm not going to know what happens. I don't know if that's going to happen for Jurassic, but because, as big as it is for us, it's not necessarily the levels of Star Wars. Maybe Harry Potter, I don't know. It's, that's pretty big too. It's in the top tier of films though, it's, or franchises at least.
Well, I mean, one positive thing I think about is that, Universal Studios here in Los Angeles, it's unlike Disneyland, they replace rides. You're Back to the Future, your E.T., those rides get replaced, but Jurassic Park, the ride, has never been replaced in over 20 years. And so I just wonder, I like that you brought up Harry Potter, because the films are such a monolithic achievement in a way that like Lord of the Rings was as well, that it's like, oh, is anybody going to try and remake that in our lifetime? Like probably, maybe an HBO television series version of Harry Potter where each season is like 10 episodes. But are people going to remake Lord of the Rings in our lifetime? I mean, there's such a crowning achievement of this period of blockbuster cinema that I can't imagine somebody doing it in the same way. So it's like sort of out of the realm of our imagination almost. But but again, with the example of Universal Studios, it's like, well, Jurassic Park the ride was still there. They're never going to tear that out, so that must count for something in a way.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I've been thinking about the park specifically a lot recently because of Harry Potter. And it seems like every other announcement is a new Harry Potter attraction. And I just keep wondering, like, how long can that last? Like, obviously Disney keeps most of its rides, like, intact. There's a few exceptions here and there, especially recently. But, how long can it keep a single franchise in a park that is constantly rotating now? All that's left in Florida is E.T. Especially after Terminator's gone, that's it. E.T. is the only one that's been there from the start. Now, that's something to think about, because I don't know what's going to happen. Are they going to take more and more out? Essentially, is it just going to be Harry Potter over time or what? But you'd have to expect Jurassic World will be thrown in there at some point in the mix. Whether they do tear out Jurassic Park River Adventure or not, I don't know. But There has been thoughts about that as well. I've heard people talk about that, replacing it completely, overhauling the entire thing, or making a separate park on its own that's just Jurassic World. There's lots of rumors floating around there, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how long something like that can last.
I mean, it could be a thing of like, the Universal Studios, Hogwarts and all that stuff. It lasts so long that when they remake Harry Potter in whatever the next form it takes, they just sort of cover up all the images of Daniel Radcliffe with like the new young Harry Potter. It's like it just evolves into its next phase. It's a thing where it's like, I wonder at any point if they were ever, would they ever, maybe if Kong Skull Island had, it did okay, but I wonder, or I don't actually know how well it did. I think it did pretty fine.
It did fine. I think it did well enough.
But it's like, when I went to Universal Studios about a month ago, it was still Peter Jackson's King Kong, the ride. They didn't change that. So, I wonder...
there's a weird like congruency between, especially in Orlando, like they have Skull Island Reign of Kong, and it has nothing to do with the movie like at all, which is called Skull Island. So it's this weird like integration where they're like, well, let's kind of benefit off of this, and that Universal, I believe, sold the rights anyway, so it's not even their property at the moment. So that it's an interesting situation there.
You're right.
Where they're just trying to benefit off of it in a way, but not Jurassic. They don't care about that in the parks. Let's not benefit off that at all.
Well, I was because it's so long between when I go to Universal Studios, like I think I went right before Jurassic Park 3 came out.
Oh wow.
And then I didn't go again until like 2010.
Uh-huh.
And then I just went this year, and it's like every time on the Universal Studios tour, the one here in Los Angeles, they keep adding more Jurassic Park stuff to the Universal, like the behind the scenes tour, which is really, it almost feels like another separate Jurassic experience because they show the vehicles on display, except for the gyrosphere, which was removed for filming.
Yeah.
But they had the boat from Jurassic Park 3, they had the trailers from The Lost World, but then they also had the rib cages were probably from The Lost World as well, but then they had the Dilophosauruses, like some leftover Dilophosauruses from the ride, but they repurposed them as part of the Universal Studios backlot tour, and they had a crushed Explorer, and so it was kind of like, oh wow, this is sort of an extra little Jurassic Park ride in the middle of this other thing.
Yeah, that's a really cool way to look at it. I never thought about it that way, and I haven't been out there in a long time to that park, so it's all kind of new to me in a way. Like I don't remember. I've seen videos and stuff, but I went out there, man. It was like, I don't know, 90s, sometime in the 90s.
Yeah.
So a lot of that stuff wasn't there.
You can even see the set for The Lost World.
Yeah, like the tracker or whatever, right? The game trail?
You can see the what's it called? The where Vince Vaughn, goes in and helicopter and calls the radio for help. You can see that.
Oh, that section, yeah.
Yeah, you can see that, but it's actually behind the set for War of the Worlds, the airplane crashing into the neighborhood. So it's like that's a big part of the Universal Studios backlot tour now. But behind it, it's like I'm just taking a peek, like kind of arching my neck to look over, and I'm like, hey, that's the set from The Lost World, like the Isla Sorna, like workers village set. And it's like, but it's not even on display, it's literally just like behind something somewhere else, sort of off the road. And it's like, I just wonder if one day, maybe when I don't know, they get tired of showing this horrifying War of the Worlds plane crash site that they take us through, if they would maybe put it front and center someday and build a whole new Jurassic Park, Lost World, Jurassic World related, expanded even more.
Yeah.
Which would be cool.
You got to think it's coming at some point, and that would be a good way to certainly expand it without really having to do too much, aside from clean up a plane crash. But, they wouldn't have to do too much, to kind of add a few things and make it, go through a Jurassic section in a way. The Skull Island ride essentially should have been a Jurassic ride before they just went with Kong instead. And, it's so weird in that park, too. There's zero transition. It's just like all these different islands pertaining to certain things, and then hey, Kong Skull Island's thrown in the middle, and where a Jurassic ride was supposed to go. So it's
I wonder if it's
unfortunate.
I wonder if it's maybe just temp to take advantage of Kong Skull Island this year, but then they're quickly going to like retrofit it back to be Jurassic Park related, because it's like this time going to Universal Studios was my first time going on like the Transformers ride and like a few of these sort of 3D rides,
all screen based.
Yeah, these screen-based rides, I mean, they're kind of a marvel technically wise, and it's like I almost want to watch a behind the scenes of how they built these rides because they're so fascinating. But I feel like now Universal is building rides so that they could easily be retrofitted and changed to something else.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Down in Florida, they just made Jimmy Fallon. Like, how long is that going to be relevant, Like
Jimmy Fallon the ride, Jesus.
Yeah, like it's a ride, it's like a Tonight Show ride, and obviously I guess they could just update it as soon as a new host comes out, but how long is that going to be a relevant attraction? That's so it's all screen based, so just switch it out, eventually. But Jurassic doesn't have that, so there's no way to like update something unless you completely reskin it. And there has been talks about the company that did the Jurassic World exhibition, Creature Tech. I think they did the animatronic for King Kong in that Skull Island ride. So there's been talk about them coming in and changing things out, whether it's part of a new thing, a new experience, or maybe even the River Adventure. I don't know.
Oh hell yeah! I'm going to Chicago in November, so I'm really hoping to go to the exhibition. I've been to the Field Museum before, but somebody was like, "Hey, you know that the Jurassic Jurassic World exhibition is going to be in Chicago when you're in Chicago." And I was like, shut the front door. I'm buying tickets right now. I don't even know if you need to buy tickets this far in advance or if you can, but I'm going to do it.
Yeah, man, it is amazing. And I'm sure it's essentially the same experience, but going out in Philly a bunch of times, it was exciting every time. And it's totally worth it.
Oh, that's so awesome. That's so great to hear.
Yeah, man, it is really awesome, especially the ending. It's essentially a 30-minute experience, but as a Jurassic fan, not just a normal, a random, museum goer, you're going to spend a lot of time there. You're going to be like stopping at each scene for way longer than you should. This thing goes in waves, so it's like they'll hold people off, they'll let people in, hold people off, let them in. And I just had waves and waves and waves and waves of people passing me. Yeah. Just like experiencing each of these segments and just like kind of standing there in awe because it is incredible. Like it does look fantastic.
Oh man. I haven't done too much peeking about what it's like, so
That's good, yeah.
That makes me glad to hear, and I feel like I'm just going to kind of try to go in as cold as possible because I mean, why not, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good thing because I think you'll be shocked at the scope and everything and the detail. It's so incredibly detailed. They did a really good job. I'm sure you've gone to other, museum things before like that where they dress it up and create a new whatever experience. But this one is like fully detailed. It's fantastic.
Oh, awesome. Oh, man. I'm going to buy my tickets now. I don't know if I need to, but I'm going to.
So why don't we actually talk about your podcast, See Jurassic Right?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, we've kind of flirted with it briefly.
Yeah.
See Jurassic Right is really... it really is just about sort of how... pop culture, and in this case it's almost like a case study. This podcast is a case study. You could do it with almost, in a way, you could do it with kind of any big piece of pop culture. It's like, how has blank affected you? And because Jurassic Park has had such a influential sort of, has been for lack of a less punnier word, a backbone in my life, I just wanted to talk to other people who feel the same way. And it's been really exciting, it's not a weekly podcast, although at this point I've almost made it a weekly podcast with all the different segments and things. But because I just wanted more excuses to talk about Jurassic Park. But the main episodes, which the first, run or first season or whatever you want to call it, will last until July next year. It started in May. each episode focuses on a different theme or topic, and then instead of interviewing one guest for a particular length of time, I interview a bunch of people about these topics. So we've had an episode where we just talked about Michael Crichton in relation to the Jurassic Park books. We just talked about dinosaurs, or we just talked about the ideas of nostalgia and hype and wonder and excitement. And so sort of each and the first episode is literally just a timeline of my life as it related to Jurassic Park. So stuff like that, where these main episodes are much, I almost think of it as like, you know, it's a collage of experience. And, you know, we've had phone calls and stuff from listeners and things like on the Michael Crichton episode, how this woman was born the day before Jurassic Park came out, and so her mom was reading Jurassic Park, trying to finish it before, like, was reading it as she was in the hospital giving birth to her daughter, amazing, who was leaving, who left us this message. And so, like, and the first thing her mom did after she had her was go see Jurassic Park in theaters because she had finished reading the book in time to have her child. Like, it's just stuff like that where it's like
amazing.
You know, stories. A friend. You know, I reconnected with a friend who said that she's like, oh yeah, I got married with the Jurassic Park theme being played on my wedding as I walked down the aisle. So it's that kind of stuff where it's like those key moments of your life, and in a strange way, how this movie, Jurassic Park franchise, has affected your life. And so those are like the main episodes. And then I do kind of mini-sodes where I just kind of like how you have the mailbag where we, you know, people kind of call in and just leave their stories and stuff. And then I do the Fan Fiction Fridays where I have my performer friends reading out loud and making fun of my childhood fan fiction, because I think as kids we all wrote, maybe not all of us wrote fan fiction, but I think you can relate to how your imagination interprets the things that you liked as a kid. Again, we were talking earlier about like, what did your brain think about this stuff? And so having fan fiction from when I was 10 years old is kind of like a record of how my brain interpreted those images. And so these kind of things kind of form the podcast. They kind of in different ways, but yeah, it was because, again, I already had your podcast and I had, you know, the In General podcast to get my fix of like the news and the gossip and the incredible stories and stuff, and just the conversations. It was like, okay, what could I do? What could I do to add to the conversation, not just be redundant? And so I've been thankful to talk to so many people who have incredible stories and voices and interesting memories and things like that and experiences. And so I mean, it's just an excuse for me to talk about Jurassic Park all the time.
That's all you need. That's it. That's the best answer you could give. You know, that's the thing that I went through, though, like the same process in a way. Is there was other people out there doing similar things, and I think you know, Outpost or JurassicWorld.org at the time, I think they were going as, and Jurassic Cast, and there was a few different things here and there, but it's like, how can you find, you know, a different route, take a different route to make it a different experience for people and do something, you know, outside the box, because they're used to hearing this style. So you want to do something a little bit different. And that's what I love about yours. And you find that perfect, you know, slot to kind of go right in. You almost take this, like, I don't know, maybe like an NPR-ish kind of approach in a way. I don't know, like, I don't know what to call it, but I think that's kind of the way I view it, because you let people tell their stories. You don't, like, I've probably interrupted you like 9 times already tonight, but like, you let people tell their stories and give their experience. And like I said earlier in the show, like, I don't necessarily remember my first, you know, interaction with it, but it's really awesome to hear people that do, you know, hear how they do remember their first experience and stuff like that. That's what I really love. And, you know, like you said with our mailbag, I do love hearing from people that, you know, experience these movies in their own way. That's probably one of the best things about doing a podcast, I feel like.
No, I agree. And I think that's an element of it too, is that, like, again, you know, there is a Jurassic Park community and we're out there, but it's almost like, because it's just not as highlighted as some other fandoms, so it's almost like there's this more urgency to, like, find more of us, you know?
Yeah.
And for me as a podcast producer, that was another element of it too. It's like, I already have two other weekly podcasts that I host, and I produce, I've produced it sometimes as produced / recorded / engineered as much as 15 podcasts at one time, and this is my job, is being a podcaster. So I think for me, artistically and just technically and creatively, I was like, okay, I want to try and do a podcast that is something more NPR-ish, that is something more like a Serial or like Missing Richard Simmons, or these podcasts that are more of these there's less of them. It's not a weekly podcast, so there's more of an emphasis on each episode versus the Percast. We're a weekly podcast, and I talk to all these incredible cat people, but it's and people about their pets and stuff, and it's so rewarding, but it is a casual conversation, whereas See Jurassic Right is music and voicemails and different topics, and so much more. There's just a lot more time put into each episode because just of the format, and that was something for myself as a podcast producer. I just needed a challenge. I just wanted to give myself a challenge. And the thing that I always realize, and like even when people ask me about how to start a podcast, it's like you're always, when it comes to like learning a new skill or like learning a new a musical instrument, a piece of software, you're always going to be slowed down creatively if you have to learn how to use that thing. And then, so not only are you learning how to use that thing, but then you're also trying to be creative with it. But it's like, if you already know how to use that software, then that'll free up the space in your brain to just kind of be purely creative instead of trying to learn something and create something at the same time. So for me, it was like, well, if I'm going to do this really challenging podcast where I'm going to do hours and hours of interviews, so that only like, a 5-minute soundbite of somebody will end up, they're carried across. That's the other thing about See Jurassic Right that I love, is that in the 15 or so main episodes that I'm doing, you're kind of hearing the same voices pop up again and again on different topics. And that's exciting for me. But again, it's that thing where it's like, I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this challenging podcast, challenging technically for me, what's the topic that to me is that I could talk about effortlessly and think about effortlessly? Well, Jurassic Park. This is the only thing where I would, again, it's that thing where it just, I needed, the challenge here was technical and creative. And so Jurassic Park was then the natural candidate for something where I'm never going to run out of things to say about it. So I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to give myself the hard work, the technical hard work, then I should at least make the creative part, or that part, I should make that part easy for me. And talking about, but it also has challenged me to think about the films and stuff in new ways. So I think it's been working out really nicely, and it's been so much fun to do.
Yeah. And one thing is interesting is you almost, you're the host, obviously, but you almost edit yourself out in a way. Like I said, you let people tell their own stories, and your podcast is specifically about telling a story. So like you said, I guess it takes a lot more time because you have to edit everything appropriately and get things in the right order. You're talking to different people, different stories, and editing it all down into a format where you're telling a specific story that one week. And editing podcasts every week, I can definitely tell, you put a lot of effort into finding the right storyline, to get everything right and to be emotional. Because I feel like that's what it is. It's not just, a daily or a weekly podcast where it's just like, here's this stuff, here it is. It's something that tells a story and is emotional, something that you can connect to.
Yeah, I just wanted people to get as emotional about it as I think you and I and your listeners know as well. It's like, this has affected our life in ways that feel important and meaningful. And to me, when I listen to a handful of, television and movie podcasts, X-Files Files when that was on, Go Bayside, things where it's like, I loved the little anecdotes of how this, of people talking about when they watched it as a kid or something. And I was like, what if I just did that as a whole podcast? And so, it was, again, giving myself a challenge, but at the same time, it's like how you're saying, it's like, well, I just also can I just talk about Jurassic Park every week and, every month, or, create a space where I can, that's the thing I've noticed about getting older. No, I mean, it's just, you want to surround yourself with the things that you like and you love. And if you can create a space where you can enjoy those things on a daily basis, it's like, why not shoot for that? You know, if there's a way that I can do it that doesn't exhaust me, I'm going to try and go for it.
Yeah, exactly. That's what this does, is it gets you involved with people you never thought you'd know. You know, you make friends and create this community of listeners and all this stuff. And it's really, really exciting. And, you know, you go places you never thought you'd go in a community. You know, maybe other podcasts are different that don't necessarily focus on a specific, you know, franchise like we do. But, yeah, there's something different about that. And I love the community interaction and all that. And you've got that, like, tenfold. It's like crazy the amount of people that are calling in and telling their stories, whether they are like huge fans or not, because I get that sense maybe people are just kind of telling their story that they remember, or maybe they're super fans. I don't know. Do you find that some people are just like casual fans?
I think it's a mix of both. If anything, what I found so far is that there's a lot of people who were impacted by this movie, if we're just speaking specifically about Jurassic Park, who almost didn't realize it until, you know, they sort of didn't realize it until it was sort of brought to their attention and sort of, you know, I mean, and that's the biggest compliment, is that thing of like, oh my gosh. And that was kind of my journey in a way, where it was like, growing up, I loved Jurassic Park, but then as I got into high school and kind of fell out of geeky fandom and stuff, and, you know, was a pretentious film school kid and you know, and stuff like that. But then as I was sort of rediscovering the Jurassic Park fandom, it's like, oh yeah, this really did impact my life in a positive way and really means a lot to me. And I think if anything, I've noticed and I've heard from listeners and stuff more in that vein of like that, they're going on that similar journey as well. And so that to me is like the more rewarding part, whether or not, you know, they were a hardcore or a casual fan. It's almost like they've been a fan all along and they almost didn't realize it, you know, and to me, that's been kind of my journey as well, is going from hardcore obsessed. And I would say I'm more obsessed with Jurassic Park than I've ever been, which is saying something, considering when you're a kid, you could never be more obsessed with anything, you know, because you literally had all the time in the world to be obsessed with something.
Yeah, it's weird how that works. I don't know why it's happening now, but I agree with that sentiment. It is like, you know, more popular for myself at this moment too. It's weird. I don't get it, but
I mean, I guess I'm just yay for being an adult in this sort of weird nerd mecca that we live in right now.
Well, it's like you said, there's so many people that you can relate to and gravitate towards, that you don't feel, you know, singled out in a way, because when you're growing up, you don't necessarily think that there are any other people that like this thing that you like, you know. They're all, everybody looks at you like, hey, what are you talking about? Dinosaurs, Jurassic Park, who cares? But once you open those floodgates and you realize there's forums, there's websites, and all of a sudden there's social media, like the entire, you know, you can find like a specific group of people that will talk to you 24/7 about this franchise. It's an experience, and I love it. I've loved the amount of people that I've met and come across and met in person that talk about this. And, you know, you see these people online, and then all of a sudden they're standing right in front of you, and you don't have that awkwardness, you know, like I'd never talked to you in person before, but we can sit here and have an hour and 19-minute conversation about Jurassic Park, no problem.
Yeah, no, that's the fun part of it too, is that you can, again, like we could probably talk for 4 hours or, you know, all night probably. And same thing with, you know, I was very lucky to, you know, I was just recently on tour with the podcast that I do, that I produce and engineer, called My Favorite Murder. And I was very lucky to meet a bunch of Australian and New Zealand and Kiwi people who listen to my podcast. And it was like, oh my gosh, I'm like halfway around the world, and somebody is handing me, you know, just very sweet, like had found in a thrift shop the OG Dimetrodon. I still pronounce that the way I did as a kid, Dimetrodon, handing me the OG Kenner Dimetrodon figure being like, oh, I found this and thought of you because I enjoy your podcast, and like just being so incredibly touched that anyone would even think of me in that way, or to see that and be like, because I feel like that's the same for you, where it's like there's people in your life where it's like, oh, I saw this Jurassic Park thing and immediately had to share it with you, had to send it to you. And I think, I mean, I don't know, that's just like, I feel like that's really nice when people see something and then they think of you when they see it. I think that is a incredibly underrated, it's an underrated feeling. I don't know if it's a feeling, but it's just like an underrated sentiment where, you know, there's those people in your life where you're like, you see something that's related to dogs, or you see something that's related to the Hunger Games or whatever, like this, you know, pancakes, I don't know, you know, this thing reminds me of you. And I think that's such a sweet thoughtfulness. And so to experience that on a level where it's beyond just close friends and family, as I feel incredibly lucky to have that.
Yeah. And you mentioned it earlier, but your fan fiction episodes, I absolutely die laughing. Like every time I'm listening to it, it cracks me up because it's all of us. You know, we all had those moments and wrote or thought about or wrote these stories and stuff like this, or drew them out. And I love the fact that you have people that read them and they're almost like confused and surprised by everything that they're reading. It's really hilarious to hear somebody who doesn't necessarily know what they're about to read just embark on this journey of your writing. It's, you know, how I don't know how many years old at this point, but it's really hilarious to listen to, and it's actually you know, like I kind of like listening to that fan fiction. It's fun.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it's I think if I was any older, I would, you know, because I actually, I think it's actually archived somewhere, Dan's JP3 page, but I do have some fan fiction from when I was a little older on there. And I'm like, I don't need to share that. That's like that's more tied to being more of your adult brain. But I think having it be the child brain, and I think also giving the space for my, you know, these performers and my friends to sort of jab at me and make fun of me, I think makes it really, I think that's what kind of ties it all together. But I was just thinking the other day, because I mean, you know, that obviously isn't going to last the entire run of the podcast. So I'm like, I don't have any more fan fiction that I could share. So I'm like, I wonder if anyone else, like, did you write any Jurassic Park fan fiction as a kid?
I definitely did. I don't have anything that you know, is laying around anymore, but that was one of those things, like I would write stories based around it, or, you know, like adjacent to it. Yeah, tried to do something along those lines, and did a lot of drawings for it, but
oh, cool.
Yeah, everything's probably gone.
You're like, what? Just let me rewrite it in what I assume my childhood brain
would I have said back in that time when I could barely write and pronounce words and all that stuff. So yeah, that's the funny part, is like you said earlier, just trying to figure out what these words are and what your interpretation of that storyline was, and how you focused on like specific parts, specific beats of Jurassic Park and maybe The Lost World. I forget what time frame you wrote it, but that maybe didn't mean anything at all later in the franchise. It's kind of fun to look at it that way.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, it was written after I saw Lost World. So
okay, that's
no Jurassic Park 3 on the horizon.
Yeah.
In my mind, you know. So it was just, I mean, the way I kind of explain it every episode up top, I think, is just a good way to think about it. It's literally just a mashup of the first two movies on a new island. Like, that's basically it. But again, the weird interpretations of it that I think are, and again, it's my friends and these performers who are doing it to me that make it just, I like the way you describe it, where they're sort of like unraveling it as they go along. They're sort of just like, what is up with it? Like, I mean, I would love to read, you know, I want more, you know, I want more people to share their fan fiction with me, because it's just funny to see how you thought as a kid.
Yeah,
unfiltered, you know, that is your purest, you know, I'm writing this book, writing this book is a very generous phrase. I'm writing this in this notebook scribbles, and it's like, oh, that is me, but 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Like, that's when else do you have access to something like that?
Yeah, it's a strange feeling looking back on old notebooks and stuff like that, seeing the things you drew and wrote. Yeah, where was my head at that point? And one of the things I love about yours is I'm pretty positive, correct me if I'm wrong, that you just incorporate a lot of like the Kenner toys and stuff like that into your story, it sounded like.
Yep. I appreciate that. And that's so fun. I mean, and it's funny that you say that, because it really didn't even hit me until right now as you said it, because like in the most recent one, I think I talked about these hang gliders, and it's because there's that Ian Malcolm hang glider figure.
Looking at it right now.
Awesome hang gliding scene we all remember from The Lost World. But you're right. That didn't even really hit me until right now as you said it. But
yeah, man,
definitely
there's like
was just playing with my toys.
There's been several nods. As I've been listening, I'm like, I'm pretty sure that he's referring to this or that. Like I think one of your guys, like Jaws Jackson.
Oh yeah, Jaws Jackson. Yeah,
that.
he was
like,
one of the trackers.
Of the toys. Yeah. And yeah, you mentioned the hang glider, and you actually like detailed the coloring and what's on it to the T. You know, it's like exactly the way it was represented as a toy, and I'm like, he's just literally sitting there, like probably on the floor, like with his notebook. He's got his toys in front of him. He's essentially creating this universe that he brought to life via toy. Like now it's a book or you know, stories.
That's such a I didn't even think about it that way, but I mean that's totally true. Yeah. Oh my god.
I gotta write a story because I have the headless Owen. I bought I bought the Owen motorcycle from Target, and it came without a head. So I'm like, I should write a story around the headless Owen, like maybe a Halloween story, I guess. You know?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Not sure if it's as endearing as a child writing it, but it might work.
Yeah, I think your listeners and I definitely want to hear it. So.
Oh, for sure. But, I think we're kind of winding down, but I do want to introduce kind of like this new thing I came up with. I've heard it a lot on different podcasts and stuff, but I wanted to do a kind of rapid fire questionnaire. So all you got to do is answer either the question or give a yes and no answer. And I think it's going to give us some real insight. Maybe you've been lying this whole time, but I think this will give us some real insight into how you feel about this franchise.
Oh, love it. I'm so game.
All right, so I'm gonna give you a 1 minute time frame here. So, you ready?
Yep, I'm ready.
All right, let's do it. 1, 2, 3. All right, JP, The Lost World, JP3, or Jurassic World?
JP.
Feathers or no feathers?
No feathers.
JP area in Universal Orlando or Hollywood?
Hollywood.
All right, good one here. Gymnastics scene, yes or no?
Yes.
Alan Grant or Malcolm?
Malcolm.
San Diego, yes or no?
Yes.
Sarah Harding or Claire Deering?
Ooh. Claire.
Is Ben Hildebrand the worst, yes or no?
Oh, hell yeah.
Michael Giacchino or Don Davis?
Michael Giacchino.
Novel or film?
Film.
Should Kelly have been cut from the team, yes or no?
No.
Tostito Don or Pepsi-saurus?
Pepsi-saurus.
Roland Tembo or Robert Muldoon?
Roland Tembo.
Which film raptor is the best? Oh, there we go. That's the end.
Oh, what was the last question, just so I can hear it?
Where was I? I think I was asking which film raptor is the best.
Oh man. I think the originals. I'm just gonna go classic on that one.
Yeah, I kind of agree to a point. Like, I feel like I look at them in different aspects, like which one's the scariest, which one looks the coolest, which one's more accurate. But yeah, I think the originals are probably my favorite because they are terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Lost World, I think they get the short shift a little bit, which is fine because I feel like that's always a problem with Jurassic Park movies, is that balance between showing new dinosaurs but also giving the older dinosaurs their due, because we want to see them return. But yeah, I wish Lost World had another scene with Velociraptors in it, just to kind of push it over the edge, because I think that would push it over the edge for me. And
those were such great designs. Like, those are probably the coolest looking ones. They look so awesome, so the evil.
Tiger raptors.
Oh yeah. So I guess that wraps it up. I think you passed the test there. That seemed good. That was. I guess you like the films. It's obvious. But I know everybody that's listening, they're gonna want to track down all your awesome work and bug you on social media. So where can everybody find you online?
Well, you can always find me at Stephen Ray Morris. That's Stephen with a V and Ray with a Y. And you can always check out See Jurassic Right. If you just type that into iTunes, you can grab that, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And it's at SJR Pod on Twitter, and See Jurassic Right on Instagram and Facebook. So yeah, just go to all those places and you can see what I'm up to and see new episodes. Do you know when this comes out, by the way?
I got to look at the schedule. I'm not sure exactly.
Well, there'll be something cool happening, so I'm sure there'll be something cool happening. So you can,
nice.
I think at any time it'll be fun. So
awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on here. This has been a lot of fun, and we got to do this again.
Oh my God, I would love to do it again. This was such an honor. We could talk all night. So, but
yeah,
we'll save some of the reserves for next time. But this was such a blast. I really had such an amazing time. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I'll have everything, all your links and everything in the show notes, and you can find them on JurassicParkPodcast.com if you want to check everything out. So I'll have all your links there. So thank you again, and why don't we head out of the visitor center?
All right. I guess we're out of a job, or we have a job.
Don't you mean extinct? Take it easy, man. Make sure to visit JurassicParkPodcast.com to find all our past episodes, brand new news articles, information on how to contact us, and much more. It's a great source for everything related to the podcast, and of course, Jurassic Park and Jurassic World. Head to JurassicParkPodcast.com and help us build a great community.
Anybody hear that?
Thanks for listening to the 119th episode of the Jurassic Park Podcast. Of course, a big thanks to Steven for joining me in the Visitor Center today. I had a blast learning about his history with the films and getting the inside scoop on See Jurassic Right. I really think it's a wonderful addition to the Jurassic podcasting landscape, so make sure to go give it a listen on any of the podcasting platforms and let him know that you checked it out. Follow him at Stephen Ray Morris and at SJR Pod on Twitter, and Stephen Ray Morris and See Jurassic Right on Instagram. Don't forget you can find all the links in our show notes. If you want to interact with us, we do most of our work over on Twitter at Jurassic Park Pod. We're also on Facebook at facebook.com/Jurassic Park Podcast, and our Instagram handle is at Jurassic Park Podcast. You can listen to us via iTunes, Google Play, Podomatic, YouTube, our website, or wherever else podcasts are found. So make sure to subscribe to automatically get new episodes every week. If you haven't already, please give us a 5-star review in iTunes or a great review wherever you listen to the podcast. It will seriously help out our rankings and make it easier for fans like you to find us. We're usually spotted commenting on the Jurassic Park subreddit as Jurassic Park Podcast. Don't forget to check out JurassicParkPodcast.com for all the links you heard here today. If you want to get a hold of us, you can email us with any news stories, MP3s, comments, or if you want to debut a segment of your own, send them to JurassicParkPod@gmail.com. Or you can submit questions directly on our website contact form. If you'd like to record something for the show, send it in to us and we'll feature it in an upcoming episode. If you don't have any way to record, you can give our voicemail line a call and leave us a message. That number is 732-825-7763. Thanks for listening, and enjoy.
No, I'm simply saying that life finds a way.
You will remember to wash your hands before you eat anything.
5 minutes. Drop what you're doing and leave now.